Today marks the 100th day of President Trump's return to the White House. And while the first 100 days featured Trump's extensive use of executive action, the next 100 will test the ability of Trump and congressional Republicans to pass legislation. Joining us to discuss, Alexander Bolton, senior staff writer here at The Hill. Hi, Alex. So Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent now says the target date to pass this sweeping domestic policy bill is now July 4th. It's notable because House Speaker Mike Johnson had been saying Memorial Day, but this is the big, beautiful bill that includes tax policy, spending, the debt ceiling, border security, defense. What are you watching for over the next several weeks to provide clues as to whether or not Republicans are on a trajectory to get this thing across the finish line?
Well, I think the big question is how do you pay for it? And it doesn't seem like there are any really good ideas for how you pay for it. Extending the Trump tax cuts that are set to expire at the end of this year, that's going to cost $4.6 trillion when you include the servicing of the debt and the interest payments you have to make on the additional debt you're going to be taking out. And that's just status quo. In addition, they're talking about up to $300 billion to secure the border, $150 billion for defense. And additional tax relief that could be, in the ballpark of another $1.5 trillion. So we are talking about, an 7 to $8 trillion bill, maybe more than that. How do you pay for it? That's the big question. And so far, the biggest pay for that's been identified is this instruction to the House Energy and Commerce Committee to find $880 billion in reductions. Now, analysts say that would have to come out of Medicaid, and that's been a fierce topic of debate over the last several weeks. Members of the Senate Finance Committee met yesterday here in the Capitol, and they discussed Medicaid. And while there are improper payments, while there is waste, fraud, and abuse, if you took out all the improper payments out of Medicaid, that would only, save you roughly, well, let's see, maybe $50 billion a year. But it would require, a lot of new expenditures, or require new expenditures just to, police the improper payments. So there is no, clear-cut answer as to how you pay for it, and that's really what's going to determine the timing of this bill. That's the thing that stands out the most. It's easy to cut taxes. The tough part is paying for it, or do you just load it all onto the deficit or onto the debt? And if so, well, then you lose votes from people like Rand Paul or of Kentucky, Chip Roy of Texas, Andy Harris of Maryland. So that's that's going to be the toughest nut to crack over the next 100 days.
Yeah, and you have Democrats waiting to pounce if Republicans put pen to paper on cuts to social safety net programs like Medicaid. So far, it seems like Republicans have been able to hide behind the ambiguity of the outlines that they've passed so far, but it does seem like the rubber is going to hit the road here pretty soon.
That's right. They're just getting started. So that's why I think even a July 4th goal is very ambitious. And what, John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, told his Republican colleagues earlier this year is that it's more likely that this won't get done until the end of July or right before the August recess. So this could bleed into the first, second week of August. And I think if they get it done by then, they'll be pretty happy. There is a lot of work to do. And, these budget outlines that have been passed, I mean, they're, as you said, they're only very broad outlines. There is no real meat in there. You don't know where the cuts are really coming from, and there's no budget score. There's no score from the Congressional Budget Office that's going to lay out in black and white, how much all this thing costs. Now, the question is, to what extent Republicans are going to try to, hide the baseline or hide the true score of this bill. And the Senate budget resolution included language that would essentially let Lindsey Graham, the Senate Budget Committee chairman, set the baseline and say, how much this thing costs. And he's already discussing that he would not count the extension of the 2017 tax cuts as adding to the deficit. So that would, at least from a formal score making or scoring perspective, that would shave perhaps $4 to $5 trillion off the cost of the bill. But Chip Roy, for instance, the firebrand from Texas, calls that strategy fairy dust. So there are some conservatives who aren't buying it, and they are very concerned about the debt. The interest on the debt now is more than we spend on defense. So it's becoming a major problem, and we're seeing that more and more because with this global trade war that's going on, interest rates are getting more expensive. That's making servicing of the debt more expensive. So, the debt crisis is hitting now, and I think the solvency of Social Security is expected to expire, I think, within the next decade. So, there are some very tough questions for the Republicans to answer, if they want to maintain, their credibility with members of the base who actually care about the deficit.
All right, we're going to have to leave it at that. Thanks so much, Alexander Bolton. Appreciate it.
Thank you.